Hey y'all, welcome to your last video for today. We're going to talk about the last two civilizations, ancient Greece and Rome. So these two are not considered to be ancient River Valley civilizations. They're part of the classical period, but they were around the same time. First, we're going to start with Greece since Greece began first. First, the most important thing to... Hey y'all, welcome back to your final video for today. We're going to finish out with ancient Greece and Rome. These are not considered to be one of the four ancient River Valley civilizations. They're actually considered to be a part of the classical period. First, we're going to talk about Greece. So the way Greece was structured was first, we're here in Europe, in the world. This is Asia, Europe, Africa. So we're looking right here, we're zoomed in. And this is where the Greek civilization was. So the important thing to know about geography here is that this region had a lot of little islands, as you see. It's separated by bodies of water. It had a lot of cliffs, and it wasn't exactly fertile. So what happened was, instead of having one unified empire, they operated with polises. And polis is a city-state in Greece that had its own government, laws, and customs. And so this is what a polis looked like. This is Athens right here. So they had the main part built on a high area called an acropolis, and then below they had the marketplace called an agora. And this is how most polises looked. Greek gods. So Greeks were polytheistic, which means that they believed in many gods. Specifically for the Greeks, they believed in 12, and they believed that Zeus led them all on Mount Olympus. Each polis, so each one of these city-states, claimed one god or goddess as their primary protector. And so what would happen is they would meet up in Olympia, and each polis would send their best athletes, and they would defend their god or goddess in a series of games called the Olympics. And we actually still participate in the Olympics today. So we have two main polises we're going to talk about, the first being Sparta. Sparta right here in the Greek civilization is at this bottom point, this little black dot right here. And it's one of the mightiest polises because they prioritize their military. At a very young age, boys were trained for the army, and at age 20, they served for a minimum of 10 years. Every boy. No women served, but they did participate in raising the boys and raising families. Here, the way the government worked is that decisions were made by a council of elders, and the men in the military carried out their counsel and their actions. The other major polis that we see in Greece is Athens. Athens is incredibly important because it developed the world's first democracy. And democracy means a form of government that is run by the people. This is actually the government that we use today. So this is the first one that we see in history. However, there were restrictions on their democracy. Only free men over 20 could hold or participate in office, so it was restricted to a subset of the population, so not exactly a true democracy. However, they did have three main bodies: the Assembly, Council of 500, and the court system. So they took this idea of separation of powers to check one another, and we actually use a very similar system today here. And so if you look down here, this is actually Athens. It's pretty well preserved in history. You can still go see a lot of these buildings today. In relation to Sparta, Sparta's right here, Athens is right over here. Important Greek achievements. So we have four things we're going to talk about with Greek achievements: philosophy, theater, architecture, and art. So philosophy was incredibly important. We see the rise of three major philosophers that we still talk about today: Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. They talk a lot about truth, justice, about who should be leader, how they should lead, and what logic is. A lot of our educational system is built on these three philosophers today. For theater, they're famous for their epics, so like the Iliad, poems, and plays. A lot of these things were either dramas, so dramatic happenings, tragedies, so sad occurrences, and comedies, and that made fun of the social society back then. In architecture, they used their intricate columns as seen here. They used marble, made grand temples, and they're most famous for the Parthenon, which is this actually right here, and it is still standing today. Their art emphasized natural lifelike poses to showcase the beauty. So Greek civilization was very proud of their civilization, and they used their art and architecture to demonstrate their strength and beauty. Alexander the Great. So Alexander the Great became a king at age 20. And he was very ambitious. He wanted to expand the empire out as far as he could. And he did. So if you see here on the map, this is Africa, Europe, Asia. This color right here, this is how far he was able to spread the empire. Originally, Greece was just right here. He controlled all of Greece and defeated Persian forces right here in Phoenicia and also into Africa, Egypt right here. And so as he spread the empire out this way, he developed and created Hellenistic culture. And so essentially we see a rise of culture that combined elements of Greece, Persia, Egypt, and Central Asia. So we see a lot of cultural diffusion happen here, which is essentially where you see a mixing of different cultures, groups, and peoples to share ideas, knowledge, and goods. So moving on to the Roman Empire. So Rome is really close to Greece. It's actually based in Italy. We still see Rome as a city today in Italy. So the Roman Empire was a republic. They used to have a monarchy, but they threw him out. The Romans established a republic where elected officials form a senate to govern. So we see patricians, which were aristocrats or rich families. They elected representatives among themselves to lead. But we see plebeians, which is common people, challenged for power. So if you've ever heard the word pleb or plebe, this is where it comes from. They developed the 12 Tables of Law, which is Rome's first written law code that provided checks and balances on government. So we see a similar concept from Greek civilization here in the Roman Empire. They also had a constitution that was not written, but it did develop a political structure that split government into parts and provided checks and balances. So here's a picture of the 12 Tables of Law. So this is really important because it unified the empire, and people, they were able to understand what they needed to do and what was expected of them. So looking at Roman Republic's three parts of government, so this is the earlier part, we see a shift in the way they governed later on. So this is around 509 BCE. So the three parts of government was the Senate, which was comprised of 300 officials who advised, controlled public finances, and handled foreign relations. Assemblies and tribunes, which were all male citizens, so again, not women. They voted on laws and elected officials, so this is the democracy piece right here, and elected magistrates. They put law into practice, governed daily affairs, and acted as judges and priests. So they would be up here in the top, and the Senate be right here. And looking at our pyramid or social hierarchy that we've been looking at, this is what it would look like. Expansion of the Roman Empire. So they had a powerful military, and that allowed them to expand out all throughout Europe. So this would be Spain right here. Into Africa, this is all Northern African right here, into the Middle East, and somewhat into Asia. And so Romans did treat the conquered people well. They let them keep their own customs. They were able to pay taxes, and they even granted citizenship in some cases. And so in order to connect all of this, they built roads. Tensions in the Roman Empire. So we see a few different things come up. We have the triumvirate, which is three people with equal power. This is the later part of the Roman Empire. So we see the rise of a consolidated group that was in control of the Roman Empire. And we see two different triumvirates. The first, which was comprised of Julius Caesar and two others. One of the two died, and so Julius Caesar took the chance and forced the Senate to let him become dictator. He argued that it was unstable and needed a stable leader in this time. And so the Senate did, and the Senate were able to keep their jobs, but essentially Julius Caesar was seizing power. And so Brutus and Cassius, which were a part of the Senate, they were afraid of Julius becoming an absolute ruler, absolute dictator, and dismantling the Senate, assassinated him. And this caused a Roman civil war. The second triumvirate that we see Mark Antony, Octavian, and Marcus Lepidus divide up the empire. And we see again quarreling over power, and Octavian and Mark Antony began to fight, and Octavian won, defeating Antony and Queen Cleopatra of Egypt, taking control of the empire. So here's that final battle depicted here. And so Octavian, after he won, he took the title of Augustus, which means exalted one, and took absolute rule. So essentially what we see is the fear in the first triumvirate becoming reality in the second. Through his leadership, however, they did enter the Pax Romana, which means a period of Roman peace. And so during this time, we see trade flowing freely. People and ideas were spreading around the entire civilization. Life in Imperial Rome. So after this, we see three important things rise up. So one, they kept the people entertained. We see these circuses or chariot races or gladiator contests. So I'm sure you all have seen depictions of this. Here's a picture here. We also see developments in engineering. They applied math and science to develop roads, bridges, harbors, temples, palaces, stadiums, and aqueducts, which they are bridge-like stone structures that brought water from the hills into cities. And we see an important figure rise out of this. Ptolemy, he proposed that the earth was the center of the universe, and in Western thought that pervades for 1,500 years. So for 1,500 years after Ptolemy, we all believed that the earth was the center of the universe and not the sun. This time is also important because Latin was a dominant language, and Latin is the roots for several different languages that we use today, such as French, Spanish, Russian, and Italian. We see the rise of Christianity here. So Rome, as they were expanding outward, they conquered Judea, which is where most Jews lived. And during this time, Jesus was born, and he began to preach about this Christianity, this monotheistic religion. The Romans and the Jews were displeased with Jesus because they thought he was disrupting the power dynamic between the government and then between Jews. And so they crucified him. This did not end Christianity, as we all know, because after his death, Jesus' disciples, that are pictured here, the 12 disciples, continued to spread Christianity throughout the world and is now one of the world's dominant religions. So the fall of Rome. After the Pax Romana ended, Constantine took power. He attempted to continue these reforms that we saw under Augustus. He granted tolerance to Christians and moved the capital from Rome to Constantinople, which is right here in the purple in the east. However, these reforms, as well as invasions from Germanic tribes and Huns, led to the fall of the Roman Empire. So the western part of the Roman Empire, here in the orange, completely collapsed. And we'll talk about them in the next unit. We see the rise of the Byzantine Empire in the east, the purple one that we've talked about previously in different lectures. As always, feel free to go back through and fill in any notes missed. Please come and see me when you're done. Thank you.